was a very packed theater.
Childish, I'm
with
sure.
people who smelled like they were from Midsommar.
Oh, fantastic. This was Burning Man Midsommar. Got it.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gabe.
And I'm Kat.
And we're the Ghouls next door.
You know.
Always the lag. Love it. Welcome to another episode of the Ghouls Next Door. It is November, so as promised, we are featuring some phenomenal guests, specifically in the horror genre, in the podcasting world, people who understand us on a deep level, our passion for this genre. And we are super excited for our guest today, who is Prince from Nightlight Pod. Hi, Prince.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the show, Gabe and Kat. I'm so excited to be here, so thank you so much for having me.
We're excited for you.
Oh, thank you. I feel so loved and warm inside.
Oh, yay! This is a safe space for horror enthusiasts.
I love it. I love it. Yes, my heart is made out of pumpkins is what I like to say, so there we go.
Aw, that's cute.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. For our listeners, Prince Jackson is the co-host of Nightlight, a horror movie podcast, which is a show that focuses on horror films and breaks films down by the plot to decipher the question, why horror? And he is a new father, joining us all the way from California. You got that new baby.
I do. Yes, you could definitely see pictures of my daughter every now and then on Twitter, at the head night. But yeah, it's so cool being a dad. It's so different. It's interesting. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. But it's just pretty cool being able to actually like kind of be there for her and know that I can teach her more and more and more. I'm actually really, really excited for all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's super exciting. We were like just talking about it beforehand.
Yeah.
Kat and I are not mothers; we don't have children. But
Not yet.
I was like, it's so it's
Take
like
your
a
time,
shock.
Take your time.
Yeah, we were talking about how it's like, you know, even harder with like COVID and Corona.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's like a whole new. It's like totally different from what it was. What did Kat say? You said it was like the old farming times.
Well, yeah, because the kids don't leave. They're always
Right.
there. So,
Yeah.
like, you're their whole world and constant source of entertainment. So it's like, usually, like, in the before time, kids would go to school and you'd
Yeah.
have, like, that break. Which isn't a break because you're doing work and stuff. But like in this time, it's like, oh no, it's all the time. You have to
Right.
just not traumatize them all the time. And it's a lot of pressure.
Exactly. Yeah, my wife is a teacher, so she's very used to having a lot of kids just always constantly hovering around her. So it's kind of like a little thing in the back of her head where it's just like, well, I'm kind of still teaching still, even though
Yeah.
we're both on our leave right now. But I actually go to my day job very, very soon. I think next week.
Gosh.
When you guys actually have this episode out, I'll be at work again. But I'm not excited about that. But my wife
Wish you
will be
safe
back a little
travels.
later. I know, right? Oh my gosh. Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
It's kind of strange how things are slowly getting back to normal, but with
Right.
that hesitancy of like, okay, we're gonna give this a try, but like it might go bad.
Right.
We're gonna have to reset again.
Exactly. Like, you're not going to catch me in theaters anytime soon. No way, no how. Even though the UK just did get Saint Maud, and I am slightly jealous because my friend Zoe, I don't know if you're both are familiar with Zobo with a Shotgun. She's based out in UK. She has a website, Zobo with a Shotgun. She's great. She's fantastic. But she went to go see Saint Maud last night, and her theater was completely empty. And I was like, what? Oh, that is the dream. If I had that experience for like A Quiet Place or something, oh my god.
Oh, yeah.
I did have that for Midsommar. So that was my experience with Midsommar. It was only like maybe 4 people inside there. So that was great.
That's fine.
Maybe if we had that experience, we would have liked it. Because our experience was a very packed theater.
Childish, I'm
with
sure.
people who smelled like they were from Midsommar.
Oh, fantastic. This was Burning Man Midsommar. Got it.
Yeah. we're like, oh, no one owns deodorant.
Oh,
okay.
I love it. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I did watch Midsommar twice, and the second time I did watch it, I did have a little bit more of a childish group where we had the very uncomfortable rape scene with Christian? No.
Yeah, his name's
Christian. Yeah, the other one's Danny. And the redhead chick. I don't remember her name, but everyone was just bursting out in the laughter, and I was like, "This is uncomfortable.
Trauma.
Like this makes it even worse to me. Like you shouldn't be laughing at this. This is pretty horrible." But all right, to each their own. To each their own.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a fun experience, like depending on the crowd that you're in, because like watching movies is always like a community event, but horror movies are also very much a community event, and like even more so because it's like we're all scared together, we're all like reacting. You got like all of us inside are like run, you know. Some of us are vocal about it. Kat and I are both movie talkers.
We make commentary the entire time, and it's horrible for people who don't enjoy that, but great for us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why when we host watch parties, it's like our favorite thing, because it's like an ongoing just stream of chat of all of us like roasting things or commenting,
talking
but
crap.
It's safe.
Absolutely. That's a blast.
You can't hear it.
Love that.
But I think like there are some, like if you get the right group, it could be like a really impactful, like it could totally change your view of a film, or like create like this memory of the film. So like for example, there's like a local, because we're in Philadelphia, there's a local show called Black Sci-Fi. And so they do like TV, they go to conventions, and they had hosted their Wakanda for Black Panther.
Oh, cool.
And so it was like, we didn't get to go see that, but from experiences, like people were saying it was like such a phenomenal experience to see people like dressed up, like in traditional African garb, like being surrounded by people who look like you and are being like excited about like this film and understanding the severity of it. And then they did a screening of Us that we got to go see.
Nice.
And it was so good. It's just like so nice to be around like people who are like, oh, you get it.
Right.
You know, man.
You understand. I love it. Oh, that's awesome. I wish we had stuff more like that in San Francisco. We typically have we do have like Alamo Draft House and stuff like that, which they have Terror Tuesdays, which is fun. That's pretty fun. But I wish we had more of like a smaller knit film community around here. There's just kind of like those pompous, pretentious people who are just really big-headed about their film sometimes, and it's just like, I really don't want to be around you. I kind of just want to be around, you know, another horror nerd right now. Like I'm completely fine not conversing with you at this moment, but it's but I mean, I love film just as much as the next person. Like I love every different types of film, and I have a very open mind when it comes to it, but I just really want to just be with my horror family. That's all I want in my life.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I'm sorry, Roger Ebert. Like,
oh
you know,
God.
sir, you don't get it, right?
Don't get it. Although I do have to give some of I guess that outlet credit nowadays. They do have a lot more fan base for horror now, which is pretty cool. So I'm pretty stoked on that. I think Roger Ebert gave Hereditary a 3 out of 4. So it's just, I was like, all right, I like it. All right, I'll accept that. Progress.
Yeah, which is like, it's funny. I've been, I saw some of your tweets about The Haunting of Bly Manor, which we haven't watched yet, but I really do want to. But based on like some of the comments that I've seen from people who've watched it before it came out, like, because I had a friend who was like, we're going to watch this. You want to watch it with me? And was like, loves Haunting of Hill House, and I had to be like, just so you know, it is going to be different. Like, I don't want you coming in here with this like concept that it's going to be like that, because his wife like doesn't like horror, and so she was like, oh God, he's going to make me watch this. I was like, no, you're going to be fine.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're going to enjoy yourself. But I've seen like people like hating on it and not understanding that like horror as a genre has like these subgenres, and then it is so like advanced of like it's not just slashers.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not murder hack 'em ups. Sometimes it can just be like like a slightly scary time.
Right,
Like
exactly.
a light dose.
Exactly. And that's what Bly Manor is. And I did my quick review, very, very spoiler free. But I got to actually watch Bly Manor a month ago. Really enjoyed Bly Manor, first and foremost. But when I first started watching Bly Manor, I expected Hill House. And
Okay.
I wasn't disappointed initially with my experience, per se. It wasn't until maybe episode 3 is when I was just like, okay, I understand what's going on here. Like, I get it. I get what's happening. But initially, when I first started kind of falling into it, episode 1 hit, and I was like, okay, this is maybe not exactly what I was expecting, but it's kind of getting creepy, I guess. And then nothing was really happening, like, as of the way that Hill House has progressed. And
Yeah.
that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm going to have to change my complete perspective on what I'm watching. I'm not watching Hill House. I'm watching Bly Manor, and I need to change my perspective to that. And this is coming from someone who hasn't read the story of Turning of a Screw, or hasn't watched the movie that came out earlier in January called The Turning. I didn't watch that. I didn't read, and even though it's a very short read, it's like an article. So I mean, we could probably all read it like super quick, but I haven't. And since I haven't gone in with complete and utter zero background, I mean, we've had so many different iterations of Hill House. We had The Haunting, we had The Haunting of Hill House, the other one from 1999. It was just so many. We had House on Haunted Hill. It's so many different pieces of aspects that we've had with The Haunting of Hill House. But when we got this iteration for Bly Manor, that is where I really kind of applauded Mike Flanagan for having the patience with other directors, kind of taking a story that he formulated with a group of other writers and so on and so forth. And it actually just made the experience that much more fascinating. And a few of my friends actually had the opportunity to direct an episode or two. And I want to say episode 8 was directed by my friend Excel. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, and she nailed it. She did fantastic. If you're familiar with her work, she did all of season 1 of Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Oh, wow.
So she, honestly, it's hands down my favorite episode, and I'm very excited for most people to get to episode 8 because I'm just like, yo, what did you think of episode 8? Because it's really good. But I absolutely adore that show, and I think it needs a little bit more patience than what people are giving it, because it is a gothic romantic horror. And even someone asked me, they were like, okay, so more like Crimson Peak. I'm like, not really. Like, Crimson Peak is a lot more brutal than this. I mean, that sink scene in Crimson Peak, that is not in Bly Manor.
It's like more Jane Eyre.
Right. Yeah. I was like, it's not that brutal, but this is like a more of a back end esque of like Mulholland Drive or something like that. It feels very much like that, which is great. But yeah, I love Bly Manor, and I can't wait for you both to watch it.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Especially like I love gothic horror.
Oh yeah,
and I just think it's like it's a fun genre, and again, it's that kind of, it speaks to how complex horror can get, that it can kind of dive into all these little niches of like content, and then you're like, you don't know what you're gonna get. So whenever people are all like, I don't like horror, I was like, you just haven't watched the right horror film or horror show.
Right. Yeah, you haven't watched it for you. And I know I have a group of friends who actually one friend in particular, I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to embarrass them, but initially they were just like, horror is not good. And I was like, well, hold on here. What is your definition of horror? Because horror spans so many leaps and bounds of different types of things, and yet you're claiming that it's not good based off of what subgenre? Because we have so many. We have so many that we can dive into. It's beyond me on how many different types of things that we can actually talk about. There's folk horror, gothic horror, there's slashers, there's gore, there's torture porn. There's so many different things that you can just kind of dip your toe in and see what you like, see what you don't like. I love psychological horror. That's one of my favorites.
Same.
I'm a huge psychological horror fan. And I also love folk horror, and mainly because folk horror is to me personally, it's very misunderstood because it's so slow and things like that. But that's the beauty behind folk horror to me. But
Hmm.
I'm actually writing a folk horror.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's I don't know what it's truly going to be just yet. But I guess this is the first time anybody is hearing about this. But
We got the
initially
exclusive.
got a little exclusive going. But I am writing a piece called Abby, which I have said that I am vocally writing about. But we are actually now in pre-production of Abby, so we are kind of wrapping up on getting the story really honed in and down, and we're talking to voice actors now and all that great stuff. So Abby is going to be, we don't know where it's going to come out yet, so that's one thing we haven't shopped around yet, but Abby is going to be an audio horror drama that will be actually coming out sometime in 2021.
best.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So it's a fun project. I'm really excited for this to really get off the ground and see the light of day. So yeah, so you heard it here first. Abby, it's going to be an audio horror drama.
Yeah, that sounds so fun. That's like definitely one of my favorite ways to ingest horror.
Oh, yeah.
Is the audio drama. One of my favorites being Alice Isn't Dead.
Oh yeah, I haven't finished it, but I definitely love Alice Isn't Dead. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. When Abby kind of takes off, definitely be sure to share it with us because we'll
will
love to
do.
promote it and put it out. Anything you do, we'll put it out there
Yeah.
because we want
Yeah.
people to
Also listen to
to
it.
do
Appreciate
it.
that. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for our listeners, why don't you? I mean, it's already like almost 20 minutes in, but kind of give them a little bit about yourself and like your own answer to why horror and what they can find at Nightlight Pod.
So initially, yes, I am the host of Nightlight, a horror movie podcast, and yeah, I love horror. I am probably. I like to consider myself an apologist when it comes to horror sometimes because I jump a lot of different genres of where I'm just like, oh, I love this subgenre now. I love this subgenre the most, but in reality, I just love them all, and sometimes I have to, I guess, take on a bigger leap on what I love more. But I'm just super stoked on honestly just horror in general. But why horror? To answer your other question, horror is something that gives me a laundry list of catharsism. And when I think of something that makes me feel good or makes me feel um, safe, this is a very odd way of putting this. I think of horror. It's just such a grounding way for me to kind of situate myself back into reality. And as both of you have mentioned that you've seen a few of my tweets on Bly Manor, there was one in particular about the Guardian. Not to hate on the Guardian or anything, but there was one in particular where they had a member of the Guardian review Bly Manor, and the first thing that they said is, "I'm not a horror fan," and
Mm-hmm.
that is something that kind of really cut me deep. And it's things like that that makes us horror fans kind of feel like we're still not completely accepted. And when we hear things like, I don't watch horror because there's enough horror in the world. Okay, that's one of the reasons why we watch horror. It's because there's horror in the world and we want to kind of numb ourselves with something that is far worse than what's happening in our world currently. And I feel like horror is very conscious of the times, and we see that time and time and time again, where we get it, especially with Nia DaCosta's Candyman, where that is really big on gentrification and how that expanded even more from 1992 in Chicago's from like Bernard Rose, Bernard Rose's Candyman
Mhm.
in 1992, and with all of that expansion like that, this is something that is we're seeing time and time and time again, where gentrification is huge, especially in the Bay Area, especially in New York, in Chicago, in Philly. Like it's
Yep.
just it's happening everywhere in all these major metropolitan cities, and we don't really get to see that kind of placed on screen as a horror narrative, when that is actually terrifying for some people, is losing their house. That is scary. That is genuinely scary. And if we can take that and kind of flip it to make this to where it is something that can feel not real, but necessarily just a little bit worse, you find that catharsis inside of that. And I'm all for mental health and well-being and things like that, and I truly deeply find that within the horror genre, and especially with multiple horror subgenres, with psychological horror being one of my favorite. Um, you get so many different aspects of that. We actually covered back in March, I think, where it was films that were for uh, kind of like mental awareness in a way, where we covered only psychological horror films, and one in particular was Jacob's Ladder, and how that dealt with PTSD and going over war trauma and things like that. And we ran into that to where these are broad and discussions that we have, to where this is something that we don't personally experience because we've never fought in a war, but at the same time, us seeing it from a perspective of seeing demons, hallucinations, having flashbacks of the war, all of that has really kind of teeter-tottered our progress of initially thinking about why horror is a piece of cathartic media. And it's just absolutely phenomenal. And I honestly, I can gush about horror all day long, which is why I have a horror movie podcast probably. But, but yeah, why horror? Because horror is awesome.
Yeah, which is why we invited you here, because we feel the same way. Yeah, we have found time and time again that horror kind of allows its audience to act out these fantasies,
Right.
and to kind of like in a safe space play out these things. And we know that, one, it's fake, right? We know that there's going to be a resolution. There's going to be an ending that we could close our eyes, like we have the power to do that, and then when we open them, we're somewhere else, right? Like we have progressed, and that kind of helps with who you are. Because I mean, growing up, I've always loved horror myself. And I've had family members who like didn't understand, and they were always just like, why do you want to watch that murder? Like, doesn't that make you like an angry person, or doesn't that make you like desensitized to violence? And it's like, not at all. Like, if anything, I'm still very, I still react in a very genuine.
Right.
Yeah. But it might help that if I were in a situation that was stressful, I have kind of a leg up because I'm not going to have the same amount of shock factor. Like I mean, I'll still be like, oh, I know what's going on, but you kind of have this recovery time that's a little more, advanced than anyone who's like, I like am afraid of anything violent.
Right.
Because like pretending it isn't there doesn't mean it's not.
Exactly. And that's the thing where I feel like horror really plays quite the role in, I guess, life in general, is where a lot of people is kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I don't have to think about it. If I'm not thinking about it, it's not there. And very much we're seeing that with coronavirus and things like that, right? Where it's just like, nope, I don't believe in coronavirus. It's not real. I can't see it. I can't feel it. And then when it gets you, you feel it. But initially, these are the types of pieces of horror that you want to respect, is where you don't want to actually have that motion of out of sight, out of mind, because that sucks, to be honest. Like when you say this is real and this is what's going on, this is life, then you come to a better understanding and you have the opportunity to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's where you get like, especially if you're talking about like the movie Us, like Jordan Peele's Us or Get Out or anything like that, where that brings up topics that are very deep in symbolism that you definitely don't have to talk about. But at the same time, if you have that concept of out of sight, out of mind, you won't see that Us is a story about the poverty line, or that Get Out is about the incarceration system. And it's very much on the top end. I'm getting chased by my doppelganger. Oh my God. Or, oh man, this is appropriation of Black people. Oh my God. And it's just like, these are very much on the surface that are very cool to talk about, and very actually important to talk about as well, because being afraid of yourself, that is a very deep thing. That is a very self-aware thing. But at the same time, when you take the step back to really dig deep, this shows you how to be empathetic towards other people. And I feel like very much horror films has created my empathy and my kindness in a way. Like I think it was maybe, gosh, 2008 when I watched Martyrs. I know, yeah, that's a rough one.
Hmm.
But when I watched that, I was in high school, so I was 17, and when I watched that, I felt so bad for how I treated women, and that made me feel like I needed to take a step in a different direction on how I go about treating women and things like that. And I'm not saying like, oh, I treated women so poorly to the point where they wanted to kick me in the face. Like it was just more so I wanted to be not, I guess, not that guy who initially saw as you're only here as another person and that's it, just like that guy over there, when it's more than that. Like, no, you're more than just a person. Like, you have this really cool aspect behind you, and I want to learn more about that. And Martyrs actually is a movie that taught me that because of all of this situational awareness that they had to put themselves into, which was very traumatic, but um,
Hmm.
but all of that has taught me to want to learn more about each and every person and want to actually understand where they're coming from in many different aspects of life. And I don't know, be kind to people and watch horror
Yeah.
movies because it really teaches you how to be kind to people. It really, really does.
That's so real. I feel like, yeah, horror operates as like a conversation starter, but then also as like a
Absolutely.
bridge to empathy because you're witnessing like such
Yes.
horrific things, or you're like seeing things. Like, as we kind of started, Gabe, it was like that horror is like on the fringe, so it can say things that
Yeah.
other genres sometimes can't.
Yeah.
And it shows things in a more, I guess, gruesome or, I guess, authentic
Honest.
way. Yeah, it's
Right.
just honest. When that's not something a lot of, especially in America, like people are used to seeing. They're used to the rose-colored, sugar-coated, everything's nice and happy.
Exactly.
But horror does have this like really great way of being like, no,
Yeah.
lots of things suck. And what are you gonna do when all the stuff starts to like
Absolutely.
hit the fan? Are you
Right.
gonna fight and survive and like help people, or are you gonna be every person in a zombie movie?
Right. Yeah.
Who's way
Are you
worse
gonna
than
get
all the
ran over?
zombies.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. Horror's great. It's just it's so, man. One more thing before I guess we go to another question. Sorry.
Yeah.
The thing about horror that really fascinates me the most is actually when people don't like it. And I love suggesting things that they may particularly enjoy. And I'm a huge fan of the whole term gateway horror because anything could be gateway horror. Like if you
Hmm.
like, I know people who don't like horror because they say, quote unquote, it's not scary, or there wasn't enough blood or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, you want blood? Oh, you want scary? All right. Well, have you heard of Terrified? Have you heard of gosh, I don't know. I'll probably could throw Martyrs again, but High Tension. Like there's so many different
Yeah.
aspects of, if you truly want to be scared, or if you truly want to see something gory or the destruction of the body or whatever, there's stuff like that. I mean, we don't even have to stick to modernized films. We can go all the way back to 1970s. We go back all the way to the 1960s if you want to go Herschel Gordon Lewis, or if you want to go David Cronenberg.
Yeah,
There's just
Cronenberg.
so many different aspects of directors that really took it there to where they will scare you and they will make you feel like you don't want children ever, like with The Brood, or
Yeah.
or maybe you don't want to go to Louisiana with 2000 Maniacs or 2001 Maniacs.
Yeah.
There's so many different aspects of horror that can kind of detour your attention and show you something that is considered gateway. And I love that. I love gateway horror. I love just so many different aspects of being able to show something to someone. And I'm actually really excited for my daughter to get older, to be able to share those things with her, because I really can't wait for her to see like Over the Garden Wall or Coraline and stuff like that, and kind of like
Coraline.
these more child friendly horror films that initially we kind of in a way kind of grew up with, even though we did probably totally didn't grow up with either one of those. But
We're 100% team scare your kids.
Oh,
we
yeah.
were
Yeah.
we grew
Oh,
up in the
100%.
90s where there were no kids television and everything was for children.
Exactly. There
And
we
we're
go.
wonderfully traumatized by that. And that's how we
Goosebumps.
are who we are
Are you
today.
afraid of the dark?
Yep.
Yeah.
Erie, Indiana, all that stuff. Give me so weird. I want all that. Just give it all to me. I want her to see that this is the stuff that her mom and dad grew up with, and I'm glad that she's young because she's not going to really know what's considered cheesy yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She doesn't know the end of the Sixth Sense. She that's the first time for her.
Right. So it could be a first for everything. So I'm gonna be like, oh, this is so weird, and even though so weird is insanely cheesy, it's still really, really good, and there's a lot of really cool talking points and all that great stuff.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things for listeners of our show are people who are like, you know, they'll like talk to us and be like, I don't like horror, or like I didn't like horror until I like listen and realize like, oh, zombies mean like consumerism or our
Yeah.
fear of the nuclear holocaust, or like like that we kind of show them that it can mean more than that, and they can step away from just like the frights that were like keeping them from like indulging in it and being like, okay, I'm gonna get through this because I know it's about something else. It kind of gives them that power, like knowledge of like, yeah, and like that's like super exciting for like new horror fans or people who are starting to kind of open up and see that there's more to the genre. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about for the future of horror is that, you know, we could definitely use some more, but we are kind of seeing new faces and new voices.
Right.
Like we are, you know, kind of opening up the space to allow for these stories being told by the people that it's covering, right? Like to have Jordan Peele be like, this is about racism. I'm not even going to pretend that's something else. Like you're going to know, right? And like, and that opened it up to him to be able to be like, all right, now we're going to talk about classism. Let's go. Like, you know, and and it's like if we get more of those, like we get more experiences and more opportunities to have that empathy. Like we can have people finally see and have that aha moment of like, oh my God, I didn't notice that I had been kind of perceiving this group of people in this way and didn't know because we're so influenced by what we're seeing on TV. Like people don't understand how representation can influence like
and
how
yourself,
you see people around you until you see something. And yourself, absolutely. Like I think our when we did our Horror While Black series during the summer, which was a pretty rough time just to kind of cover in America. And so it was a very raw experience to kind of talk about those things, but we were also thankful to have that opportunity that we do have media out there that allowed us to kind of like, let's look at this. Let's see what the experience is like and understand that horror is different for everybody because where they come from. You know, like because of how you experience the world's going to look different to you. And therefore your horrors look different from mine.
Absolutely. And I love when film can actually go ahead and provide that perspective on so many different levels. And we actually had a discussion about this on a panel that I was a part of on Salem Horror Fest. But excuse me, inside that panel, we discussed about a character that was technically written white, then transitioned to a person who was of color, is telling such a different story. And you get to see it from a slightly different perspective and have it from a different understanding, instead of seeing that in initially a white perspective. She was like, can you imagine if Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street was black? Like that would have told a completely different story. Like it's so interesting to see how that is what actually is able to span our thought process on film in general. It's just seeing how a person of color can slightly tell a separate, different story. And I'm not saying this is a necessity all the time. It would be awesome, but this is something that I just personally think for myself is that I would like to see that more representation on screen that will allow us to uh, just be able to see these things in a different light. And that is what horror has been doing. And it still has a lot of work to do, but it has been a lot more open. And I'm glad to see icons like Candyman come back. And I'm loving the work that Jordan Peele's doing. I'm loving the work that Mike Flanagan's doing, to where he is giving black people a voice in his films and his TV shows and things like that. And not even just black people, people of color. Like in Haunting of Hill House, we had Levy Tran, and in Bly Manor, I'm blanking on her name, and my apologies, but in Bly Manor, we have a strong black character who's in almost every single episode, and it's really cool stuff like that. And then he gave us Abra in Doctor Sleep, and you're able to kind of see where film is starting to go, where you got like with the girl with all the gifts, who was a character that was for sure written white, and they transitioned her into a black girl, and that just told a completely separate story of being able to instill your trust not only in a child that is different, but in a black child that is different. And it's so fascinating. And man, I'm really enjoying this kind of renaissance of taking these separate, I wouldn't even call them risks. There's nothing to risk here. There's just these separate perspectives. And I'm really enjoying that renaissance of this separate perspective. Really enjoying it.
Yeah, I think it adds to just the genre as a whole, because I mean, we've seen and heard those same stories time and time again. We've had those slashers, we've had like, there's only so many ways that you could tell the same white experience, like white male experience, right? And that's like, not to say that we don't need them. Like, there's been some really great things from that, but there are more people in the world, and you're only adding to it. Like, you're only giving us more experience. You're only like improving. You're only becoming more inventive by putting the pen in someone else's hand and kind of passing, the camera over and being like, it's your turn. I've done a lot. And now it's your turn, because
it's like the one episode we had where it's like, it doesn't just like erase all the ones that happened before. It's just new stuff. It's like the remake of Watchmen. It was so much better.
Much better.
It's positive time. It's just a new thing. Everyone needs it.
They're embracing, and I'm not too sure how far you are. Oh wait, no, you said you're all caught up on Lovecraft Country, correct?
Yes.
Like, not the new episode that comes out tonight,
the one
but
that is airing tonight. But just seeing that, and I remember when it first released, or the very first episode came out, and I sent out a tweet saying, please watch this and understand it. Just truly take a time to kind of open your mind and understand. And if you have questions, ask those questions. Like, it's completely fine to not know this. Like, my wife has never heard of a Sundown County, and that was an interesting conversation that I had to explain to her. And these are all things that should be a part of conversations every day. They shouldn't be something that you find out in a TV show. I'm glad that people are finding out about it, but it really kind of breaks my heart that no one has heard of Juneteenth until this year. Like, like I was even telling my mother-in-law, and she was like, I've never even heard of this holiday. I was like, oh yeah, like we used to celebrate it all the time, and it would mainly just be family gatherings and barbecues, but still we did it on Juneteenth. And it's things like that makes me excited to see where the future goes, of people being more educated on this kind of stuff and understanding and taking an opportunity to look at it from that perspective. And granted, we are going to get a lot of haters out of this, just as we have. We're going to get a lot of evil people who want to capitalize off of something like this, or who want to kind of bring it down and say that it doesn't exist and all this other stuff. And it's nonsense like that really makes me angry. And to even kind of piggyback off what you said earlier, Gabe, about like your family saying like doesn't horror films make you angry and make you want to, I don't know, hurt people, and it's just like, no, statements like that make me want to hurt people. Like, you need to stop.
It's your ignorance that's gonna set me off right now. Yeah, I mean, so we were talking to our last episode was with Sade Sellers, who was with you on the Salem show. So she did mention kind of like switching out for any of the kids in I Know What You Did Last Summer and making them black, but even just thinking of like Candyman, right? Like the original Clive Barker tale is not set in Chicago. It's not about, you know.
Not.
And
He's
so
also
like
redhead.
Yeah. And it is similar, and like, you know, there is, you know, statements about class and kind of that tension, but to move it to America, and then the natural thing to do is then to move it and make it about race, because that seems to go hand in hand. And so seeing something like that is why Candyman is such an important piece of media in horror specifically. And I think why the kind of evolution to now have Nia DaCosta's Candyman, which is so relevant and present, and kind of brings us back to that whole like the experience being in the audience together, and the fact that like she's like, we postponed it to next year because it has to be a community thing.
Yeah,
because like it so much is that, right? And I think right now is a time when we really need a film like Candyman. We need shows like Lovecraft Country and Watchmen, so people can learn about Tulsa. Like, because it makes us then question, like, what else have they not been telling us? Like there's an insidious conspiracy in the system, right, in America, and it always comes back to that where I'm like, it's so brilliant, it's so real. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm like, you don't understand. It is systemic. Like you go off on
everything,
tangents.
It is.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, horror being that fringe kind of allows us to live out those fears, even if you're not, you know, in that world specifically, and have that empathy, right? Because we're at about 40 something minutes. We should probably hop into our film. We'll do a little bit of it. So we are going to talk about Scare Me, which is brand new. Came out for, you know, the spooky season on Shudder. It is about two strangers tell scary stories in a Catskills cabin during a power outage, and is directed by Joss Rubin, starring him and Aya Cash and Chris Redd. We watched. I saw the trailer for it like a while ago, and then I heard it was coming out, and everyone was going crazy on Twitter, of course, and I was like, I have to see it. I also love Aya Cash. Like, we are big fans of You're the Worst, so like anything she's in, I'm like, yes.
Yeah, she's a great actress.
She's awesome.
Need more of her. I have not watched season 2 of The Boys yet, because I don't know if I'm quite ready to hate her.
Right. I would say now that it's done, you're in a good spot. Because once I got to episode 3, I was like, oh my God, I can't. Like, I can't. But now that it's done, like it's actually it's a really good watch. It's a really good watch.
You could have like a like a breath. That's good. We as soon as I was like, you know, it wasn't on our list. We, you know, watch at least 1 to 2 horror movies every week for our show, and so
it's been 3 years. Watched so many
for 3 years. So it's like so it was like not even on our list of like, this was like purely recreational horror, which we never really get to do anymore. But I was like, we're making time. We're gonna watch this. I want to see it, and it was so fun. It was a great time, and I felt like it was very unique. And it's been a long time since I've like watched something and been like, I don't think I can think of another thing. Like, there's so many references to horror, but even with that, it's like that's the whole point. It's like, like, you know. And so it was so refreshing to see something new and inventive and very creative with such like a minimal set, and just like these 3 actors, so most of the time just 2, doing stuff that could keep you entertained for all that time.
Absolutely, we should get Josh on this show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I could. He's a buddy. He's a buddy
100%.
of mine. I can reach out to him for you. Yeah, we should get him on the show to have him actually really talk more about Scare Me with you. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, Scare Me's fantastic. It is absolutely bananas. I've never seen anything like this before, and when I explain it to people, they're just like, how. This doesn't sound like this works, and it doesn't. On paper, this does not sound like a good idea.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like a guy in a cabin who tells him and this random person scary stories, but we don't act out. We don't cut to the scary story, not like a normal anthology film that we're used to. So this is really an anthology film, and it's a very well done one. But at the same time, this movie is very much a book, right? It is very much a short story, and it plays like one, and you have to really, really use your imagination to visualize what they're seeing. And Akash and also Josh, they both have like such fantastic facial expressions. When
Yes.
Chris Red
Expressive
comes in,
faces.
oh my gosh. Like
Oh, boy,
hats off to
yeah.
him too. Like, it's so much fun just seeing all of that, and you can tell that they just had fun with this film, and that was like the main basis of that. We're having fun. I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but and I won't. I'm just gonna mention one thing. But initially, the film is mainly a basis off of inspiration and copying, and that is genius to me. Is we see every film nowadays, and when was the last time you watched a film that it didn't remind you of another film? Like it's just it happens because they get inspiration and things like that from all these different types of pieces, and this was done so well to where it's just like one redacted person's work was stolen, then another redacted person's work was stolen, and then redacted person got famous off of redacted person's stolen story. And at the same time, they still were even referencing other movies within their reenactments, where we had Jaws, we had Tales of the Crypt, it was just so many great little pieces that were added to that, to where this was a story about taking someone else's work and not owning it initially. But that is what that film basis really felt like. And I've seen Scare Me maybe close to 15, 16 times.
Wow.
Yeah. I love Scare Me, but I had the opportunity to watch it a couple of weeks before it actually got released, and I just hit up Josh immediately. I texted him. I was like, dude, I don't know how you did this, but thank you. Like, thank you for putting this out into the world, because this is something that definitely resonates with me, and it's my second favorite movie of the year, and which was I thought was going to be really hard to beat, because I saw a film called Come True. I'm not too sure if you've seen that yet. Okay, not yet. Okay, it's not coming out until 2021, but Come True is fantastic. It's like a reimagining of Nightmare on Elm Street almost. It is something like I don't even know how to really explain it without giving it away. But Come True I thought was unbeatable. I thought Come True was going to be completely unbeatable, and two films beat it quickly for me: Possessor and Scare Me. And that was just like, all right, now this is where we're at right now.
Which is like exciting, right? Like I think this year has been really fun for horror. Like I keep seeing a lot of new things popping up where it's like, what is that? Like, oh my gosh. And like, and diversity too. Like I'm seeing like a lot of black faces on screen, and I'm like, yes, what is this? I need to watch that now.
Yes. Bring me and, like, all of it.
Yeah, I think Shudder is doing such a great job too. There are sometimes where I'm just like, hoping that there could be more, but Shudder really is kind of doing some really interesting things. Like one, having like the documentary of horror noir, and coming out with the queer horror documentary too. Like to have these conversations that can be accessible by everyone to watch and see like oh wait, you know what? Like this whole
Right.
time, horror's been doing this, and like we
Absolutely.
Yeah.
made jokes about it, but it's real. It affects people.
Yes.
And then just having like these films, like we watched Spiral, and we're
Oh, so good.
taken aback by that. So good, and it was like we had just done last year a representation in horror series, and one of our we had guests come on from those communities to talk about how they're represented in horror and kind of dissect films. And when we had our LGBTQIA episode, it was kind of hard to find like a horror film we wanted to talk about that was positive. And we actually
wasn't upsetting.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And we ended up settling on I'm totally blanking on the name, but it's by the people who did Spiral. It's their first one.
Okay.
Ah,
Yeah.
dang,
What
I am blanking on that too.
What do you?
What keeps you
It's a
alive?
good question. What keeps you alive?
Yeah.
Yes.
What keeps you alive? Yep.
Yeah, and so I was like, that it's so exciting that we have another one like this year, right? Like that this person is able to have a platform to create that, and like so mad I'm blanking on names right now. But I think it's a very exciting time in the horror world because I think people are finally starting to see the merit and value from featuring these other voices.
I agree. Definitely agree. Horror is just such a great place to find that initial balance. And even my buddies Joe and Trace from Horror Queers, they're doing really great work of dissecting those particular types of films with that horror twist to it, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 or even Spiral even. But it's just it's so many great aspects of being able to see that perspective. And I love that kind of stuff. I really really love that. And I love like even the work that Bloody Disgusting in general is doing when it comes to the podcast repertoire. Because that's where Nightlight's home is. Nightlight's a part of Bloody Disgusting, but initially where we have so many different shows that come from so many different perspectives that is just lovely to see. And I'm proud of all of the great stuff that we're getting now for 2020 and what's coming in 2021. I mean, we get A Quiet Place Part 2 in 2021, everybody. Like, how exciting is that? Like, come on.
Yeah.
But like, it's all of that kind of stuff that we as horror fans can look forward to because there's an expansion of diversity. Because we hear the term get thrown around of elevated horror, but I always say like, no, this isn't elevated horror. This is diverse horror. This is horror now showing a diverse leg. This isn't elevated. Horror's always been smart since the 1940s. Let's even go back since the 1890s. We can go back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So it's like horror's always been smart. It's never has not been a smart genre. And with that was a double negative, but whatever. With that being said, this is diverse horror. What we're in right now, this is something that we're not seeing a lot of leg on. Where I was listening to someone on a podcast talk about how they compared Invisible Man to Hereditary and Get Out, saying this is elevated horror. And when I was listening to say that, I was just like, well, first and foremost, I love Invisible Man, but it is not even close to what Get Out and Hereditary did. But what Invisible Man did do that is fantastic and really needs to be shown is it really talked about how toxic relationships can be. And how, well, not all of them, but how a toxic relationship, it feels like you're trapped and it feels like you can never let go, even when you want to. Or even when you try to, and there's always some type of hole to where you maybe have to take legal action, or maybe you have to even move, which is horrible to think about. But all of this abuse that came within that film are things that are not to me elevated. That's diverse. We don't see that in horror that blatant. And when you see it on screen that blatant, like we get it a lot in like rape and revenge films, where you get it in Revenge and you get it in The Nightingale and things like that, where it's the toxicity of men in general, because men suck sometimes. But initially, with all of that, you really get the aspect of seeing certain pieces, and it even spanned even deeper where everyone thought she was crazy. And that's another thing. And that was one thing that a buddy of mine also was just like, oh man, I would have loved it if there would have actually been nothing there. And I was like, no, like that's not the point. You're not getting it. Like the whole thing is about this toxic relationship that she was stuck in until even after death, she was stuck in this toxic relationship. And that is the point of this film. And that is something that I applaud because it is diverse. It is something we don't get to really discuss on film, and I absolutely love that. And Lifetime's obviously been doing this for years, right? Lifetime Network, they've been doing that stuff for years, which is great. Like we got you from that, so that's all great and stuff like that. So
you is a situation.
You is a situation. But I mean, without Lifetime, we wouldn't have gotten you, and then they scrapped it, and then Netflix picked it up, and it was the whole thing. Shout out to Victoria Pederetti, though. She is just an absolute delight. She is fantastic. From Hill House to Bly Manor to You season 2, she's great. But yes, I don't know where I was going with all this, but diverse horror. This is initially where we're at right now, and I am living in it, and I want this to be the norm. I want this to show this types of diversity throughout years to come. So
yeah, I think, as long as we're allowing people to tell their stories and kind of giving more opportunities for that, we're gonna get like this amazing horror. Like I think of there were parts of Invisible Man we liked, specifically with cinematography, and the pitch of it. Of course, we were like, oh my god, like abusive relationships, like don't we know? But there were parts of it that we were disappointed in as women, right? Like it was like I imagine what this film would be in different hands, right? Like and the kind of different storytelling we can have with that as well. That we get really excited about. And so it's like there's always room for improvement, obviously. But I think there's a lot of things that have been made, and I agree that it's not really elevated horror or social horror, because there's always been commentary. Horror has always been commentary on what we are afraid of right now. So like if it's a nuclear holocaust or we're afraid of like women controlling their bodies, like Rosemary's Baby, like we have right, like it has always been saying things. But what I think is great is that we have this kind of general populace that are now seeing that, which means that now there's money there. Now there's like an audience that's like larger. And so we have more opportunities, which is like super exciting. And I think that's great. Kat, do you have specific questions?
Not questions. I think like the biggest thing that I've been like thinking for like the last like minute is that like elevated horror that's so interesting, because that's just like privilege. It's just like, it's so nice that you don't have to think about that all the time.
Right.
Wow, so nice for you. That's a situation, like that's extra, and it's like no, that's like people's day.
That's reality.
Like
absolutely.
You
like,
thinking it's elevated is that's just some self-reflection that needs to happen, maybe.
Absolutely. Could you imagine like if Jennifer Kent was the person who actually directed The Invisible Man, like how much more visceral that would have been? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah, and I think I hope that
I love you
that people see that. Yeah.
I also have an expressive face and can't help myself. So
yeah, we have a hard time not.
My eyebrows say all my emotions.
Let it out.
Yeah. That's why we have this platform.
Exactly.
I really. For our listeners and viewers, definitely check out Nightlight Pod. We can check you out on Twitter, correct? Let's see, I got
Twitter.
Some plugs.
There we are.
At Goodnight Life. I also got your website here, goodnight.life/nightlight.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people do the calm, so I'm glad you definitely got the life in there. Thank you.
Copy and paste. Copy and paste.
There we go. Love it.
Yeah. Is there anywhere else that our listeners or viewers could find you?
Yeah, you can find me personally on Twitter as well at the Head Knight. That's Knight with a K as well, or you can find me over on Bloody Disgusting as well, bloody-disgusting.com.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been super fun.
Yeah.
We
so much for
were
having me.
so excited. Like, we were like, this is so great. This is our time of the, because it goes out for November is my
Yes.
birthday month. So I was like, that's when I want to like be with people that I care about or like that will make me feel good things.
Yeah, I love it. That's my birthday month too. So I'm right there with you. Yeah, November
Scorpios.
16th. That's me over here.
Scorpios. Yeah.
Yep.
Mine's November 4th, and so
Oh, yours is coming up.
it's right after Election Day. Right, we'll see if
gonna
it's
be
a
interesting.
Well, if we're
bad
still here,
birthday.
there's a comment. So we could be living
Yep.
melancholia. We don't even know.
There
Oh
you go.
God, that's
Oh,
horrible.
man.
That's terrifying.
Oh,
Yeah, this has been so much fun.
this was a blast.
Kind of
Thank you for
geeking
having
out
me.
with you. Well, Kat, as we say,
Oh yeah, don't get married. Delete your
delete your
kids.
kids.
I love that.